And good morning. Welcome back to the Stand By Me podcast series. I am Alicia Lucke, and I'm a program manager with the Oregon Cascades West Council of Governments, and very happy to be here with you today.
And my name is Meleah Ashford. I'm a consultant with the Stand By Me program, and excited to talk to Prem today about the Oregon Financial Wellness ScoreCard.
And I'm Prem Matthew. I'm the Interim Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at Oregon State University. I'm also the Director for the Center for Advancing Financial Education. And prior to my interim role, I was an Associate Professor of Finance in the College of Business here.
So basically, you know a little bit about money.
Just a little bit, yeah.
That's good.
Wonderful. Yes, we have an expert in our mix today. We're really excited. So the Oregon Financial Wellness ScoreCard was released recently, the 2026 iteration, and I believe it's been in existence since 2023. And the goal of the Oregon Financial Wellness ScoreCard is that it was created to help answer a question with data to kind of back it up, and that is, how are Oregonians faring financially? And there's not a single statistic that can answer that question. And so as we look to the scorecard and all of its elements, we'll see that it compiles an array of data points from trusted sources to illustrate how Oregonians are doing. So it looks at things like credit and debt, household financial situations, resiliency, and consumer behavior. And so Prem, talk to us a little bit about the FEAT, which is under the Oregon Treasurer's Office, and kind of its role with the rollout of the card.
Yeah, so the treasurer brought together a group of folks that had an interest in the financial education space across the state. So that includes folks from credit unions, folks from communities that were invested in this space, myself as well. And I think that it started in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. It was kind of it was a carryover from an effort that the previous treasurer had been doing in the financial wellness space.
Interesting, a post-COVID project, if you will.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the things that we looked at getting off the ground was the scorecard, because what we realized back then is that there wasn't a lot of visibility into how Oregonians specifically fared financially. There were national surveys from which you can glean how it's going in Oregon, but there wasn't anything that was just Oregon-based. And so we felt that this was a good opportunity to put together something that would provide transparency into how Oregonians are doing. The first scorecard relied a little bit on some of the literature in the space, where we were looking at measuring financial literacy or knowledge, financial stress, and also financial decision making. And so that was the first set of data that we collected, and wanted to compare how different demographics, education levels impacted those variables.
Interesting. Yeah, we use a scorecard for a myriad of things that Stand By Me. I know in this podcast series, we like to give practical tips and tricks about how to manage your money and all those sorts of things. But I think many times for us, when we think about ways to train our coaches on how to help folks, it's really wonderful to have something like the scorecard that shows on a yearly basis, right? Many of these things you have to wait for the biennium budget or, every 5 years. But every year we get this snapshot of what's going on right now in the economy, how is it affecting Oregonians, and it really helps us to train our coaches on, some of those things that bubble up in the report. So speaking of those kind of major themes in the report, Meleah and I, we found it interesting with our group to see that folks not having enough in emergency savings is a theme that bubbled up twice, right? 2 years in a row.
Yep.
So, let's chat about that a little bit.
Yeah, and like you said, Alicia, about 50% of our Oregonians do not have $500 in emergency savings, which is scary, right? And so from an educational perspective, just for folks to understand how important that is, life happens, and you need to be able to be at least somewhat prepared for that. And so that is a statistic which is not it's similar to the statistic across the country, but it's still something that needs to be addressed.
We talk about the emergency fund a lot. You know, we really push people to have an emergency fund, because if you don't have an emergency fund, you tend to use a credit card or some other means that is that puts you further in debt and upsets the financial apple cart, if you will. So we have a lot of different ways to figure out how much of an emergency fund a person should have. It's very individual depending on what kind of expenses you have. But it is so critical for the stability to have that.
Yeah, and one of the things that we looked at initially in the first scorecard was the connection between knowledge, your financial habits, and your stress. And so the less knowledge you have, typically your habits are not consistent with financial wellness, which increases your stress levels.
Yeah, and decision making, right?
And decision making,
if you have higher financial literacy, you tend to make better decisions, which is kind of, obvious, but it's really nice to see that they're in the data.
Yeah, and so speaking of financial education, the FEET and the scorecard, I think, were critical in Oregon's passing of State Senate Bill 3, which requires all of our high school students to take a class in personal finance. And so the class that's graduating in 2027 will have been required to have a personal finance course.
Be
which is,
really
again,
interesting to see how the financial scorecard changes. And hopefully we see an uptick in folks' financial literacy and financial habits from
and
that.
it also changes how Stand By Me, how CAFE actually does their work, right? So for CAFE, more than 50% of our work is with OSU students. And OSU students are about 60% Oregonians. So as we get more students that have that education, we can have more robust, more advanced conversations about financial education and habits. And just like Stand By Me, you can hopefully move in that direction where you have a more informed public that allows you to talk about more advanced
Can
topics.
you tell the audience a little bit about CAFE?
Yeah, sure. So CAFE, the Center for Advancing Financial Education, was started in 2020, March, just as we went into COVID. And it came about because of a gap in the financial support structure at OSU. We had really good financial aid folks. We had really good student account folks, but there was that gap where nobody really was able to provide students with kind of a budgeting tool set, right? So basic finance tools.
Great.
And so, being a professor of finance, I said, okay, I'll let me try and get this off the ground, and it's been successful. So we're now very much integrated into the financial landscape at OSU, supporting incoming students, continuing students, and also working a lot with the community in terms of presentations, things like that. So
I feel like there's kind of a groundswell of people who are interested in getting to know more about their finances. And one of the things that I noticed when I was doing my research about the scorecard was that there was a discussion of how your financial well-being is so connected to the rest of your life, your health, your mental health, your ability to take care of yourself in so many different ways. So I think that's really great.
Yeah. Can I add just one more thing to that? And so even from an OSU perspective, it impacts academics, right? So if you are struggling financially, it will stress you out, and it'll make it more difficult for you to be successful in academics. So,
absolutely, yeah. One of the areas that I found interesting was the main stressors for Oregonians. And I was a little bit surprised to see that utilities was right up there with housing.
Yeah, I mean, the theme over the last, especially the last couple of years, is that costs have risen, right? And it's becoming increasingly stressful for folks, even though what we've seen in the last scorecard is that our net worth and net incomes are rising. So the costs are more than offsetting the increase in income. And that is a stressful situation for individuals.
So is there anything else in the scorecard from this year that was of interest to you, Prem, that kind of stood out from years past?
My understanding is that you're the data cruncher.
Yeah.
So what was it that came out for you?
So I was the data cruncher, the main one, for the first couple of scorecards. Then in 2024, what we realized is that we would like to do this on an annual basis, right? We want the scorecard released annually with Oregon information. One of the main sources of information was from FINRA, who does a financial survey across the country, but they do it only once in 3 years.
Okay.
And so we didn't want to have to wait 3 years to do ours. So we brought in another organization, Oregon Values and Beliefs, who have started doing the Oregon surveys. And so now they've become the data crunchers.
Okay.
I'm able to look at the data after the fact, but
Yeah.
They're doing most of the data work.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So then back to your question about the things that kind of you want to highlight in the current survey. It does say that more than half of the respondents have taken a personal finance course. Great. So hopefully that number goes up. More people are saving for retirement, 70% in Oregon, which is higher than the national average. Those are both really positive data points from the scorecard. Alicia, like you mentioned, one of the negatives is, or the concerning data points is 73% have cut back on spending because of the rising housing and utilities and food costs. And like you said, that utilities and housing costs are the biggest stressors.
Yeah.
Like 39% indicating so. So those are some of the what stand out to me from the current scorecard.
Great.
Yeah, so as we think about this data and clients that come to us through Stand By Me, it's neat to see that what we're seeing, well, it's not neat, but it's that what we're seeing is kind of typical across the state, right? So the scorecard pulls data purposefully from rural and urban areas. And as Prem mentioned in the 2026 card, they said it didn't matter where you live. Oregonians are kind of struggling across the board, and so something like Stand By Me can really help. Right? We're not a life coach and we're not a financial advisor. We're kind of that middle of the road coach that can help with accountability and habit formation, or in 2026, creative thinking about how to stretch that dollar. And so, it's just really exciting to see local folks getting together. We know that Ashley Wilson, our good friend at Oregon State Credit Union, also sits on the feet with you. And if you listen back to an earlier podcast, you can hear about how their services can help you start a savings account, really low cost, and tips and tricks on how to do that. But for me, to go to the treasurer's office and to go to the feet and see folks like Ashley up there, lots of local leaders, Prem, your input, it's a nice warm hug to this problem that's affecting most of us. And so
and I think from a Stand By Me perspective, because the scorecard has a breakdown by demographic, it allows you to kind of at least see what the starting point might be for your clients from specific locations, specific demographics, right? You know where they might be weaker, where they might be stronger, which will allow you to kind of tailor what your conversations might look like. So I think that way the scorecard is helpful. Same thing, in terms of how CAFE might use this especially in our presentations to the communities. It's if we're going to a rural community, we know that the scorecard tells us that folks in rural communities tend to be more underbanked or unbanked. So it gives us kind of a direction as to what kinds of things we might want to include in the presentation.
One of the things that I noticed was the questions are both numeric questions and literacy questions, but also questions about how you feel about how much stress you have. And that's a part of what we're moving towards in Stand By Me as well, because how you feel about money really impacts your behavior towards money. Oh, I thought that was interesting.
So that's it's an interesting point, and the kind of a corollary to that is there are portions of our community that don't feel comfortable talking about money.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Right, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's also very different by demographic. So the more visibility there is in things like the ScoreCard, like services like Stand By Me offers financial coaching, where you make it comfortable to have that conversation. That makes it so much easier to actually change habits and understand what it takes to be successful financially.
Very neat.
Well, shall we wrap it up?
Sure. So thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode. Special thanks to Prem Matthew and the expertise he brings locally to the financial scorecard. Special thanks to the Treasurer's Office for having this resource for us to use, whether it be at a local outreach event or even to influence policy like Senate Bill 3. And so next time we'll be chatting about all things financial literacy, and we'll be excited to chat with you again.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.